In our previous episode on the history of Valyria, we detailed the Rhoynish Wars and the Valyrian sack of Sarhoy, which inadvertently led to the unification of the Rhoynar. However, it remained to be seen whether this tacit coordination between the peoples of the Rhoyne would be enough to halt the unstoppable tide that was the Dragon Riders' conquest of Essos. Garin the Great's mighty crusade, supplemented by the support of Mother Rhoyne herself, would present the greatest challenge to Valyrian rule since the lockstep legions of Old Geese went toe-to-toe with the Dragon Lords. Yet the fate of the Rhoynish people would lie not with the mighty warrior Garin, but with the indomitable Nymeria. So let us recount the culmination of the Valyrian-Rhoynish conflict and how a mighty warrior princess led 1,000 ships across the sea to find salvation for her people. The city of Sarhoy had been destroyed in the Second Spice War at the hands of a combined host of Valyrian soldiers and 3 Dragon Lords at their head. The destruction of the greatest and most beautiful city within the Rhoynish domains caused dramatic reverberations throughout Rhoynish society. The greatest of all the princes of Rhoynar, Garin of Troyan, declared to his people that they shall all be slaves unless we join together to end this threat. Whilst the decision to unify his people against the Freehold was the wisest path to take, it remained to be seen if any force upon the far-reaching continent of Essos could stand against the Dragon Lords and their mighty hosts. A mighty warrior prince to his very core, Garin successfully called upon his brethren to join with him in washing away the Valyrian taint within his homeland. However, this great alliance was not free from detractors. Chief among them was Nymeria, the Princess of Nyssa, who declared, "This is a war we cannot hope to win." In this discourse, she was shouted down as all of the other princes declared for Garin. Nymeria's warriors likewise declared for Garin, forcing Nymeria to join in the Grand Alliance. Although Rhoynish strength had been diminished throughout the years of war with the Valyrians, especially after the sack of Sarhoy, they remained a populous and warlike people. As such, Garin, with the support of the nobility of the Rhoyne, amassed the largest army ever seen in Essos within his capital of Troyan. The chronicler Beldekar has put the number of this mighty gathering of the Rhoynish at 250,000 strong. Every man capable of taking up arms from the headwaters of the Rhoyne down to each of her many mouths made their way to the festival city to join the great campaign against the Freehold. Here, the imperious Garin informed the princes and gathered swords that so long as they stayed in proximity to the Rhoyne, they need not fear the Valyrian dragons. The water wizards of the Rhoynish, empowered by Mother Rhoyne herself, would serve as an effective counterweight against the unstoppable bringers of fire and blood, or so Garin led his people to believe. However, Garin would not rely solely upon the magic employed by his water wizards, and would also draw upon his own military expertise and tact. To that end, the prince divided his mighty host into 3 separate armies, the first of which marched down the eastern bank of the Rhoyne, the second trailed along her western bank, and the last of which consisted of an immense fleet of war galleys which kept pace with the former 2 forces down the river. This last force would sweep the river, disposing of all Valyrian ships that could potentially harass or flank the eastern or western armies. Through this strategy, Garin essentially flung open the mighty gates of Troyan, from where his forces would usher forth, smashing Valyrian villages, towns, outposts and garrisons in their path. The first proper confrontation came in the city of Selhoris, where Garin's mettle would be tested for the first time. Selhoris was garrisoned by some 30,000 men, well provisioned and well fortified. However, the Rhoynish took the city by storm, slaughtering the garrison. The city of Valasar would fall soon after. These minor triumphs were encouraging to the Rhoynish cause, but neither of these outposts would match the challenge they faced at the city of Volantheris. Here, at the head of the host of the Rhoynar, Garin faced off against 100,000 soldiers, 100 war elephants, and 3 Dragon Lords. The fighting was brutal, testing the Rhoynish coalition to its limits. Despite a bitter, blood-soaked melee, the result of the battle followed the same course as that of the previous battles for Selhoris and Velisar. Dragonfire consumed thousands of Garin's men, yet thousands more found shelter in the shallows of the river from the all-consuming wrath of the Valyrian mounts. Here, within the shallows of the Rhoyne, the water wizards called upon the strength of their deity to throw enormous waterspouts against the dragons of the Freehold. Rhoynish archers were subsequently able to bring down 2 of the 3 dragons, while the last of the dragons fled back to the Freehold upon wounded wings. Following on from this great victory, Mother Rhoynar herself crashed down upon Voluntheris with such rage that the city was swallowed whole. This divine intervention on the part of the Rhoynish deity led the mighty host to bestow upon their ruler the name Garin the Great, a name the supposed saviour of the Rhoynar took to with aplomb. As he continued the advance of his armies down the river, word came to Volantis of the coming of Garin the Great. Rather than give them a fight, they retreated behind their black walls. However, even behind such imposing fortifications, their safety was not certain against the massive army that Garin had brought to bear. As such, they appealed to the Freehold for aid. The winged bringers of devastation and destruction came at the call of the Volantines, not the 3 which Garin had dispatched at Voluntheris, but some 300 or more, if the tales passed down are to be believed. None could contend with the flames of the Freehold. Not even Garin the Great, fresh from his victories further up the Rhoyne, could pose more than a slight inconvenience to the Valyrians. The dragonfire which came slaughtered tens of thousands of the Rhoynish in a deluge of heat and spasmodic violence not seen since the wars with Old Geese. Many others rushed to the river, believing Mother Rhoynar would offer them protection from the freeholders, only to drown in her bloodied waters. Garin the Great was taken alive in the conflict and forced to watch as his people were punished for their defiance. The combined Volantine and Valyrian host put the Rhoynish to the sword, in numbers so great as to turn the great harbour of Volantis red as far as the horizon. Following this crushing victory, the combined Volantine-Valyrian force moved north along the river in a punitive campaign to ensure none along the Rhoyne would ever rise against them again. Sarmel was brutally sacked as the freeholders made their way ever closer to Troyan. Prince Garin was forced to watch the slow march to his home city, locked within a golden cage at the command of the Valyrians. From this cage, he would be forced to watch the destruction of the festival city within which his campaign had begun with such enthusiasm. At Troyan, Garin's cage was hung from the very walls of the city, as he was to be presented with a first-hand view of what was to come. The women and children, bereft of the protection of their husbands and fathers, who had died in Garin's gallant efforts further south, were enslaved en masse. The city itself now lay firmly within Valyrian control. However, Garin could not bear to witness what had become of his home. As such, his lips uttered a brutal curse upon the enslavers as he called upon Mother Rhoynar to avenge her children. That very night, Mother Rhoynar answered, and a great swell came upon the river. With much greater force than had ever before been witnessed, the Rhoyne broke its banks. A thick fog consumed the city upon the tides of the Rhoyne, and with it came the curse of Garin the Great. The Valyrian conquerors, so proud upon the backs of their dragons, began to fall foul of Greyscale, and one by one they would die from this brutal affliction. This tale is not an embellished one, however, as the explorer Lomas Longstrider later wrote of the drowned ruins which once made up the festival city of Troyan. Here the foul fog still lay, and wayward travellers infected by Greyscale and driven mad by its affliction were its only denizens. These lost and broken souls now posed a distinct danger to all who deigned to travel the Rhoyne, making use of the broken expanse of the former Bridge of Dream. Further up the Rhoyne, Princess Nymeria of Nisar received news of the shattering of the host of Garin the Great and the destruction of Sarmel and Troyan, which left her with a uniquely difficult choice to make. Knowing the same fate would await her own people, she made the decision to flee her own homeland. Nymeria subsequently gathered every vessel she could find that lay upon the mighty Rhoyne, filling them with all the women and children who yet resided in her city. The male residents of the city had died within Garin's great war with the Freehold, and as such, the fleet lacked much in the way of protection against those whom they would face upon their journey. Nymeria led her fleet down the Rhoyne, avoiding the Valyrians, passing by the ruined Rhoynish settlements, fields of slain Rhoynish warriors, and horrifyingly bloated floating corpses. In order to avoid Volantis, Nymeria took an older channel, which brought them to the Summer Sea, where once the city of Sahoy had stood. The legends state that Nymeria amassed a fleet of 10,000 ships. Beldekar believed that this number had been inflated almost tenfold, while others gave further varying figures. Regardless, it was a large number, primarily composed of rivercraft including skiffs, trading galleys, fishing boats and the like, crammed to the very rafters with women and children. Beldekar firmly insisted that only 1 in 10 of these ships were remotely seaworthy, with the first storm they encountered sinking some 100 vessels. The fleet limped to Basilisk Isles, where they were assaulted by the Corsair kings of Axile, incurring further losses. From there, the fleet managed to avoid being entirely enslaved by the Corsairs, taking once more to the sea and attempting to settle in Basilisk Point in the inhospitable Sothoios. A year they would last in this brutal land, wherein they struggled to eke out even a bare existence. However, the breaking point came when they found that the residents of the settlement of Yin were found to have disappeared without a trace into the jungles of Sothoios overnight. Knowing Sothoios would be the end of them, Nymeria took her people to sea once more for a further 3 years, settling first in the Isle of Nath, then the Summer Isles, before eventually making their way to Westeros. Many of her people did not make it to Westeros, and to this day, isolated groups of Rhoynish still dwell upon the Stepstones, descended from those who were shipwrecked. Many more had their ships blown off course to Lys and Tyrosh, where they were enslaved. The remnants of Nymeria's 10,000 settled in Dorne, their safety sealed by Nymeria's marriage to Mors Martell, the local lord. Nymeria herself declared upon their successful landing in Dorne, "Our wanderings are at an end, and we have found a new home, and here we shall live and die." There they would be free from the Freehold's grasp, yet they could not fully escape the yoke of Valyrian overlordship for long, as the Valyrian domains, strength and base of operations were to be rocked by what was to come. Even beings of such strength and power as the Dragon Lords of Old Valyria could not truly escape the doom which long awaited them. This brings us to the precipice of the doom of Valyria. However, this is the story for our next documentary on the history of Westeros. The next few videos in this series will be dedicated to the fall of the Valyrian Freehold, but we're planning to cover the battles of many other fantasy, sci-fi and space opera universes, so make sure you have subscribed and pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.